Hello and welcome to the next video about GitHub Actions. Today we will see how to pass data between dependent workflows and, to be even more specific, how to pass data between workflow A and workflow B, which is triggered using the workflow run event. If this is your first meeting with GitHub Actions, then I highly encourage you to check out my previous video or blog post in which I teach from the very basics what exactly GitHub Actions are and how we can easily configure them. With all of that said, let's prepare our example project in which we will have two dependent workflows. So let's assume that we would like to add a new workflow to our GitHub Actions, workflow B, which will be triggered whenever workflow A completes successfully. So we go quickly to GitHub documentation and see that workflow run will be the event that we would like to use. As we can see, this event can have three statuses: completed, requested, in progress. In our case, we would like to rely on the completed job, and basically that's all we need to know at this point. If you'd like to learn more about this event, I'll put a link into the description for this video so you can get acquainted with it whenever you want. Nevertheless, let's get back to our repository and let's click on the actions. Following, let's configure a simple workflow. And I'll start everything by changing the name. It will be called workflow A. Workflow A. I'll delete everything so that we'll set up it from the very scratch. The first thing we need to specify is the name. So name, and I would like to call it workflow A. Workflow A. Excellent. Nextly, I would like this one to be triggered whenever we push any commit to the main branch. So we have to specify on, specify the event, so this will be push, branches, and right here I'll specify the main branch. Following, we need to specify some job. I would like this one to only print out some text to the output for now. So we need to specify jobs. The name of the job, I'll call it some job. Following, we need to specify the runner for this job, and we will use Ubuntu latest. Runs on Ubuntu latest. Nextly, let's specify some steps. We'll have one step, steps. We need to specify the list. The name of the step will be some step, I don't care. And we would like to run a simple script which will print out hello to the output. Echo hello to the output. Excellent. Let's commit changes. Create workflow A, commit directly to the branch. With this setting, we expect that this workflow will be triggered immediately after this merge. So let's go to the actions. We have workflow A. We can see that this is triggered, which means that everything is working as expected. Following, let's introduce another workflow, workflow B, which will be triggered only whenever workflow A completes successfully. So let me get back to the code. Workflows. We have workflow A. We can click add file, create new file, and I will specify workflow B. Workflow B. Of course, this will be YAML file. Similarly, firstly, let's specify the name, workflow B. Following, as the event, we will specify the workflow run. So, workflow run. Now we need to specify the name of the workflow for which we would like to trigger this. So, workflows. Right here we can specify the array. And we need to specify the name, not the name of the file, the name property from workflow A file. Workflow A. Excellent. Following, I mentioned that I would like this to be run only when it completes successfully. So as the first step, I would like to specify the type, completed. Types. And right here, we'll specify completed. Excellent. Similarly, we need to specify a job with some steps, so let's click enter, navigate to the next line, jobs, and I will call it run on workflow success. So run on workflow A success. Following, I would like to add the if condition. As I told before, I want this to be run only when it completes and only when it is successful. So that's why we need additional condition here, if, and right here we'll specify the variable. We'll access the GitHub context and fetch the information about conclusion of the previous workflow. So GitHub event workflow run conclusion and equals to success. Let me double check that. GitHub event workflow run conclusion equals to success. So whenever it fails or something like that, it will not be triggered. Similarly, we need to specify the runner. So runs on Ubuntu latest. And following, we need to specify steps. Steps. The name will be run on workflow a success. Run on workflow a success. And the script echo workflow a completed successfully. Wonderful. Let's commit changes. Create workflow B. Commit directly to the main branch, which means that workflow A should be triggered. So let's commit changes and immediately let's go to the actions. As we can see right here, workflow A already started because this is triggered whenever a new commit is pushed to the main branch. When it finishes, we expect that the workflow B will be started too. And as we can see, that's what's happening, which indicates that everything is running successfully. To double check, we can open up the result, go to here, run a workflow, and we can see the text, workflow A completed successfully. At this point, we already saw that we somehow accessed the data, because when I get back to my workflow B, let me open up the YAML file, we can see that firstly, we access what is the type of our event that was triggered. Additionally, from the context, we access the conclusion to verify whether this is successful. Additionally, if you saw my previous blog post or video and you are aware of GitHub context, you know that there are plenty other data that you can access at this point. However, what if you would like to access some custom data that will send between workflow A and workflow B? Unfortunately, at the moment when I'm recording this video, there is no such thing as a custom context or something similar we could use to put the data and access them in workflow B. Fortunately, we can bypass this limitation by producing artifacts. So let's navigate to workflow A and let's edit this. And let's introduce a new job. I will call it job producing data. And this one will be responsible for creating a JSON file and publishing it as a GitHub artifact. So let's specify a name, job producing data. I would like this one to run on Ubuntu latest. Also runs on Ubuntu latest. Steps. The name of the step will be some step, for example. We don't care about that. And following, we need to specify the script. So run. Let's make it multi-line. In the following line, let's use the printf command. Printf. Here, let's start the JSON. Let's specify some properties. Prop1 of some string value colon property2. Let's make it boolean, for example. In the next line, let's close the JSON file, finish the command, and let's create the content.json file. Content.json file. Following, let's specify the uses, and right here we will make use of the reusable workflows. Actions / upload artifact at v3. Excellent. Following, let's specify the name of our file, context, JSON, and the path where I would like to path it will go with the root. Wonderful. So to summarize, with this solution we produce the content.json file, which we then publish as an artifact. In simple words, GitHub artifacts are files or collection of files that we can produce during the workflow run and access later, for example from other workflows, but also through the API or simply from the web view, which we will see in a moment. So let's commit changes to the main branch. We will see this workflow run, actions, workflow A. We can see that workflow runs at this moment. Let's open it up and make sure that both jobs will run successfully. Wonderful. After some time we can see that the workflow completed successfully and a new artifact was created. So following, let's update the workflow B to consume the file and access its data. So let's get back to code, workflows, workflow B, edit the file, and let's make the necessary changes. I will leave the first job as is and we will introduce a next one. I'll call it download context artifact. Download context artifact. This one will be running also on Ubuntu latest, so runs on Ubuntu latest. And this job will have 3 steps. The first one will be to download artifact, the second one will be to unzip it, and the third one will be to return the parsed JSON. So let's start with downloading. Let me hit enter, uses, and we'll specify GitHub script actions /GitHub script version 6 v6. Wonderful. So let's add steps. The first step, name will be download artifact. Download artifact. Following, let's specify uses, actions /GitHub script at v6. Wonderful. Following, we need to specify the script to this shared workflow with script. Let's make it multi-line, and right here we'll use Node.js, so let's specify everything we need. Firstly, I would like to access the list of all artifacts that were produced during the workflow A run. So let all artifacts equals await GitHub REST actions list workflow run artifacts. Excellent. Right here we will specify owner, context, repo owner. Following, we need to specify the repo itself, repo, context, repo.repo, colon, and lastly I would like to specify the run ID for which the artifacts were produced. So run ID, context, payload, workflow run.id. Excellent. Let's finish this and put semicolon. Following, I would like to verify whether the artifact of the following name, context JSON, is in the list of all artifacts. So let match artifact equals all artifacts dot data artifacts filter artifact, let's specify lambda, return artifact name equals context JSON file. Let's close this one and reference to the one at index 0. Nextly, I would like to download this file, so let download equals, again we'll be querying the API, GitHub REST actions, download artifact, and right here we need to specify owner, repo, artifact ID, and archive format. Unfortunately, we cannot download directly the JSON file, that's why we will fetch the zip file and unzip it in the next step. Owner, context, repo, owner, repo, context, repo, repo, colon, artifact ID, match artifact ID, and lastly archive format zip. Archive format, and this one will be zip string. Excellent. Let's close similarly, semicolon. Wonderful. Lastly, we'll write this file so that the next steps will be able to access that. So let fs equals, let's go with import require fs semicolon and write file sync. Fs write file sync. And right here, I would like to specify our GitHub workspace /content zip so that in the next steps, we'll refer to this context JSON file. Excellent. Right here, process and GitHub workspace /context zip. As the second argument, buffer from download data. Wonderful. The next step will be unzipping the artifacts. So let me get back right here. Name, unzip artifact. Let's go to the next line. Sorry. Quite possible. No, it's working fine. Sometimes it might be the issue with wrong indentation when you're working with YAML files, especially if you are working with editor like that. So nevertheless, let's get back and let's run the unzip command. Run unzip context.zip. And lastly, I would like to parse the data from this JSON. So I'll specify again name, return parsed JSON. Let's go with uses, actions, GitHub script, again v6. This time I would like to additionally specify the ID for this step. In a moment you'll learn why, but for now let's specify that as return parsed JSON. So ID return parsed JSON, and with script, again multi-line, and let's parse the JSON. Let fs again require fs, sorry I missed this one, semicolon, let data equals fs, this time dot read file sync, and let's specify the path of the file. So it will be root /context JSON. Close this one, and the last one I would like to use the return function. Return JSON parse data. Wonderful. The last thing I would like to do will be to specify the output. In a moment we'll spend some time to figure out what exactly we are doing here step by step, but for now let's focus on the work. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 outputs, property 1, and right here, as I mentioned previously, let me fix the indentation for the outputs. Now it is correct one, and what I would like to do. So right here, I would like to produce the output for our job. So whenever we want to pass the data between jobs in the same workflow, we will use outputs. Previously, I used the ID and returned the data from the previous steps. So right now, using this ID, I will be able to refer to the result of this script. Let me show you how. From JSON, and now steps, return parsed JSON. This is the identifier of the steps. Outputs, result. So right now we are referring to this value here. Let's close this one, and we can refer to our property. So I will call it prop1. Let me copy this line, and property 2. I would like to refer to the property 2, which was the Boolean value. With that done, we'll introduce the last job, which will be dependent on this job, and will print out red values to the output. So let me click enter, navigate here, log context values, log context values, this will be the name of the job. Needs. I would like this one to be run only when this one succeeds. So let me copy download context artifact name and specify here. Excellent. Nextly, we must specify the runner runs on Ubuntu latest. Let's hit enter and let's introduce the only step we'll have here, which will be called log context values. Name log context values, run multi-line script, echo, and I will simply print out these values. So this time I will be referring to the other job and to its outputs. So we will use so-called needs context. Here, needs. We copy the name of the job that we would like to access the data from. Outputs, because we will be referring to the output. And lastly, the name of the output. And that's basically the whole magic that we need to do here. Similarly, let's copy and paste this line once again and refer to the property too. So let's see it once again. Sorry, I see some error here. I put it by mistake. Nevertheless, coming back to the topic. Firstly, we use the needs context and we specify the job from which we'll be pulling the data. So this is download context artifact job. Nextly, we refer to the outputs, which means that we'll be using the data from the outputs, and lastly we specify simply the key which we would like to use. So let's go quickly back and see what we implemented here. So we have two jobs, download context artifact and log context values. The first one is responsible for downloading the artifact. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, GitHub API supports only zip files at the moment, so we cannot fetch the JSON file directly, and we unfortunately must unzip the file later. Next, we list all articles from the triggering flow, workflow A. We specify workflow run ID right here. Following, we are matching it and downloading the artifact. So we are writing this so that we can access that in the next step, which is unzip artifact. Lastly, we parse the JSON and produce some outputs. As I mentioned previously, outputs allow us to pass the data between jobs within the same workflow. And lastly, we simply print out this data. So let me commit these changes. It's quite possible I made some small typos, so no worries. We'll see whether everything is working as expected. So go, commit changes, commit directly to the main branch, which means that we will trigger workflow A. And let's go to actions. Let's wait for the workflow A to finish. We can see it succeeded. So let's wait for the workflow B to be triggered. Wonderful, it started now. So let me open it up and see what's happening. Here we can see the error and maybe that's not good, but we will see how to debug things like that. So we can see that failed to evaluate job outputs. This job failed. Moreover, we see that log context values was not run when it failed, because it is dependent on this one. Secondly, the template is not valid. Error readed JToken from JSON reader, line, blah, blah, blah. Let me navigate back to the code and let's see what went wrong. Workflow B, YAML file. So this step failed and let's see the script. This one seems to be good. Match artifact similarly. Download owner specified repo specified artifact ID matches archive format, everything is cool. Line 31, we see that we made a typo here. Let me edit this file. Here, let's close, double check. Right here we use the correct one. Buffer.from download.data unzip artifact require fs read file sync context JSON matches JSON parse the data. So let me commit it once again and verify whether this is working successfully. The workflow A started. Let's wait for the workflow B. And we see it's in progress. Let's click on it. Let's see whether download context artifact succeeds. Again, we have some other issue. Let me get back. I can see that March. Unfortunately, the artifact is not cool here. No worries, you will see that this is quite often happening in real life, so trust me, you'll spend some time figuring out different things in the YAML file. Let me get back to actions. Workflow A started. Let's wait for the workflow B to be triggered. Now workflow B started. Let's click on it. Hopefully this time it will be working fine. No, it's not. So this time we can see another issue. Resource not accessible by integration. In simple words, it means that our workflow does not have all the necessary privileges to read and write files. And one of the ways to fix that, we can go to our repository settings, general, right here, click on actions, general, and let's change that to read and write permissions. And hit save. Following, let's re-trigger the workflow so we can get back to actions. Click on workflow A, and right here we can click rerun all jobs. Let's get back to actions, all workflows, and again let's wait for the workflow B to be triggered. Wonderful, we can see that it's now in progress. Let it open up. And this time we see that the context JSON is not found. So actually let me open up the code, workflows, workflow A, hit right here, context, JSON, commit changes, and we'll see this run once again. And of course, no worries, if you would like to get the full code, working code, then in the description for this video, you will find a link to my blog posts. Let me open up the workflow B. This time we can see that the context was downloaded successfully. Let me open up the log context values job. Let's figure out. And we can see that everything is working as expected. The sum string value was printed out and the true value was printed out too, which means that everything runs successfully. So as I mentioned previously, in order to get the full working example, I encourage you to check out my blog and get the code because it's pretty easy to simply make mistakes in the YAML files, just like you could see in my example. But I really hope that you find this video valuable. And this is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed this one, and if you would like to learn more about GitHub Actions, then let me know in the comment section, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel. See you in the next videos. Bye.